Hey, welcome back to my channel. If you've been keeping up with my videos, you'll know that my dad and I recently took a trip to Scotland. We rented a car and drove around the Isle of Skye, which was absolutely gorgeous. And I decided to make a little video about tips on driving in the Isle of Skye specifically, but also just Scotland in general. And so if you are planning on renting a car or a van or what have you, and are kind of nervous about driving in Scotland, this video is for you. I hope that it helps out. I have 5 tips all together. Some of them are maybe things you've thought of, and some might be new. So let's just go ahead and get started. But first, I kind of wanted to explain that I didn't do any of the driving on this trip. My dad actually did all the driving, so maybe I'm not the best person to give these tips. I was a really good passenger, but I didn't drive. And I will explain why in one of the tips so you kind of understand. But I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so now, tip number 1. This is probably the most important tip for anyone who is coming from America or most countries in the world that drive on the right side, because of course in Scotland, the UK, they drive on the left side, and then inside the car you sit, the driver, on the right side. So it's all very backwards. And then, of course, the street signs are going to be mostly on the left side, so you've got to know where to look. And like I said, I didn't do any of the driving, so I can't really speak to how easy it is to shift to the other side. My dad seemed to have a little bit of trouble at first, and occasionally I would catch him driving on the wrong side and be like, "Hey, Dad," which is kind of a good tip to have a passenger who can keep an eye out for you as well. Make sure you're driving on the correct side and look out for street signs and stuff as well. Tip number 2, and this is why I didn't drive, and that's because the van we had was manual. Manual transmissions are way more common in Scotland. You could get an automatic, but they aren't as common and they usually cost more to rent, which is why we ended up going with a manual. Dad, of course, knows how to drive a manual, and he's an awesome driver too. I gotta say, shout out to Dad for doing all the driving on pretty much all of our trips. Thank you. You're the best. He's a much better driver than I am. So yeah, if you've never driven manual, now is probably not the time to start and just kind of look for a automatic, or if you have time to learn manual before you go to Scotland, you can do that. But yeah, keep that in mind. Pay attention when you're renting a car that you're getting either automatic or manual, depending on which one you prefer. Okay, tip number 3, and this one is definitely more specific to the Isle of Skye. That's the main part of Scotland where we were, so I don't know if it's like this other places or not, but on Isle of Skye, the speed limit was kind of crazy, if you ask me. So in towns, it was slower, obviously, usually like 30, I think, miles per hour, and they do miles per hour, not kilometers per hour. But out in the countryside on the Isle of Skye, it was usually 60 miles an hour, which just seemed really, really fast for us, even in a big van, because the roads are very narrow, very twisty. They're not like the most upkept kind of roads, so there are potholes, rough sides, so it's pretty much impossible to go 60 unless you're a local. The locals drive faster, but as tourists, definitely don't try to go 60. Maybe go around 40 or so miles an hour. I feel like that would be a little bit more manageable, maybe even slower if you feel more comfortable. But just keep in mind that you don't have to go the 60. It's pretty much just the locals that are going crazy. And once you see the roads, you'll definitely agree with me. You also have to keep in mind that when you are driving slower, it's going to take longer to get places. So if your GPS says it's going to take an hour to get there, that's assuming you're going the speed limit. And if you're not going that fast, it's going to take you longer. So just keep that in mind. That kind of messed us up a couple of times, thinking we were going to get somewhere at a certain time, and it ended up not being the case. Okay, tip number 4, this kind of goes along with why you would not want to go the speed limit, and that is because out in the country, most of the streets are single lane. That's not one way, but single lane. So cars are coming from both directions. And so you have to keep out for that. Like I said, some of the places it is kind of twisty, so just make sure when you're going around those bends to keep an eye out for oncoming traffic. And if two cars do kind of come together, then there are passing places on the side of the road every so often, very common, so you don't have to worry. And whoever is closest to a place to pull off will just have to either pull in or back up into it. And like I said, you are driving on the left side, even though it's just, you know, a single lane. So make sure you pull in on the left side. Don't pull in on the right side. People can go around you on the right side. Okay, tip number 5, and this is the last one, and that is sheep. There are a ton of sheep on the Isle of Skye. Some of them are penned up, but most of them are free range. And they do like to wander next to the street, so you've got to make sure you don't hit any. I wouldn't say they're usually in the street that often, but they are like laying on the side of the street a lot, or just kind of walking by. So keep an eye out for them. Again, this is another reason to kind of drive slower and just keep an eye out. They are very white. They stand out against the landscape very well, so you know, they're not gonna hopefully run out of nowhere. They usually aren't running either. They're very amble-y kind of creatures. All right, so those are my tips for driving in the Isle of Skye or Scotland in general. If you have any other tips, go ahead and leave them down in the comments, and go ahead and give this video a like if it helped you out. Go ahead and subscribe as well. If you haven't watched any of my Scotland videos, go ahead and watch those. After this video, we're gonna move on to Barcelona content, and I am really excited to share my time in Spain with you. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you have an awesome day. Peace.